Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Making It Easy, a web series where we go over academic skills you might be having a hard time with and want to improve on. In this episode, I will be covering equivalent fractions. Long word, I know, but think of it like another math word we hear. We have equivalent, another word is equal. Equal, there you go, that's the word. Equal and equivalent are pretty much the same thing. So when we're talking about equivalent fractions, we're talking about fractions that are the same, but they have a different name. Now, I know what you're thinking, fractions don't have names, and you're right, they don't. But what I'm talking about is how we identify the fractions. We might say 1/2 or 3/4 or 6/8. That's what I mean by the fraction's name. So when we're talking about equivalent fractions, I'm going to be talking about fractions that are the same, but they have a different name. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So let's say I have 4 sandwiches that are the same size. I am going to use rectangles to symbolize the sandwiches because it will be easier to visualize. So I have my 4 sandwiches and they are all the same length. I'm going to cut each sandwich into different equal parts. So looking at these sandwiches now, if I wanted to take half from each of these sandwiches, what fraction will I be taking from each sandwich? This first one's easy. We cut the sandwich in half, so we have 2 parts, and we are going to be taking one of those parts. So our fraction is 1/2, or 1/2. Now let's look at the next one. It was broken into 4 separate parts. What fraction would be half of the sandwich? Let's count the highlighted parts. 1, 2. 2 parts of this sandwich makes half of the sandwich. We know this is true because the number of parts highlighted is the same as the amount of parts not highlighted. There are 2 here and 2 here. So if I am focusing on 2 parts of this sandwich, what fraction makes half of the sandwich? 2/4. 2/4 is the same as 1/2. Now let's look at the next one. This sandwich was cut into 8 equal parts. What fraction makes up half of the sandwich? Let's use the same strategy we just did. Let's count the amount of highlighted parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the fraction for half of this sandwich is 4/8, or 4/8. Are you starting to see a pattern now? I hope you are, because I'm going to want you to try and solve the last sandwich on your own. So what fraction makes half of that sandwich? So I'm going to give you 3 seconds. Of course, pause the video if you need more time, and we'll discuss it after this counter over here hits 0. I hope you got 8/16. Because we can see 8 pieces is half of the sandwich, and the whole sandwich was cut into 16 pieces. So the fraction for half of this sandwich is the 8 parts we're focusing on over the 16 parts that make up the whole sandwich. Maybe you've noticed by now that we've been talking about halves this whole time, and yet we've been writing different fractions. So remember how I was talking about equivalent fractions being fractions that are the same, but they have a different name? Well, we just proved that 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4, which is the same thing as 4/8, which is the same thing as 8/16. And those, my friend, are equivalent fractions. All right, are you ready for the challenging question? So this one's a doozy, so make sure you take the time and effort to really try and solve this one, okay? Let's flex that brain. Your challenging question is to think about the relationships between the equivalent fractions listed. What pattern do you see? Actually, scratch that. I really want you to take the time and effort to try and figure out what that pattern is. So keep on working on it. If you have it already, good. Hold on to it. Look out for our next episode, Equivalent Fractions Part 2, where I will talk about that pattern and how we can use it to find equivalent fractions for other types of fractions. So in the meantime, give yourself some love, pat yourself on the back, give your brain a kiss, because you now know what equivalent fractions are and how they show up in our lives. I hope I made math a little easier for you. I'm Mr. Wayne, signing out. Be safe out there, friends.